and welcome to NCBI Labs.
So you're very welcome to this week's live event from the Labs team here at NCBI. Today we have our regular panel with us. We've got JP Corcoran and we've got Daniel Dunn with us and Sean Doran as well to offer their expert opinion throughout the show, as well as, of course, the general area of respectability and substance that they bring to our live events every week as well. Even what some have called humour, if you'd believe it. Well, either way, they're all joining me for our live event today, and we hope you enjoy what's coming up throughout the show. In our Meet the Team section today, we're going to have the opportunity to talk to Ann-Marie Walsh, one of our community resource workers in the Southeast. We'll be finding out a bit about Ann-Marie and about the work that she does with NCBI as well. And after that, we're going to be talking about the development of the JAWS screen reader. We're delighted to say that for that section, we're going to be joined by key JAWS architect for over 25 years, Glen Gordan, and we'll be chatting about the early days of JAWS, the challenges of adapting a screen reader to a graphical user interface such as Windows, and I'm sure you'll enjoy that discussion just a little bit later. And of course, later on in the show as well, we're also going to bring back fan favourite Joe Lonergan, and Joe is going to be talking to us about the process of creating a shopping list on Amazon Alexa devices. He's even going to do that live. So plenty of scope for things to go wrong with that. So we look forward to that later on. Of course, we have our usual tech news and tech help sections as well. So all in all, we have a pretty packed show on for you today. Don't forget that we want to hear from you as well. So if there are any questions that you'd like answered or technology you'd like us to cover or any questions throughout the show today as well, you can contact us either using the Q&A panel on the right hand side of Teams, or you can email us at labs@ncbi.ie. But to start us off for today's show, let's introduce our guest for Meet the Team this week. And we're talking to the one and only Ann-Marie Walsh. You're very welcome, Ann-Marie.
Thanks, Jude. I have to say you've real calling there for radio presentation. Ryan Tuberty, he'd want to watch his position in RTE.
Not very keenly. He doesn't. He doesn't have to watch out too much.
You want to be careful now, I'd say.
So Ann-Marie, it's good to have you on the show, and thanks for joining us this week. We know each other going back a while, of course, because we were working together in the Southeast. But can you tell us a little bit just about where exactly you're based and how long you've been with NCBI?
Okay, so my office base is in Kilkenny, but I suppose really years ago I would have covered South Tipperary predominantly. But now anybody over 23 years of age who's not seeking employment or education, myself and my colleagues in the Southeast would work with those people. So it's not really geographically based now, it's more that the region we're kind of covering, I suppose, Carlow, Kilkenny, South Tipperary, kind of the areas that I'm kind of working in mainly at the moment. And then I do some work with neurological vision loss as well, and that's the whole Southeast.
Very good. Okay, and that's kind of interesting to talk about. We might come back to that in a second, but maybe just tell us a little bit about your background, Ann-Marie, just kind of life before NCBI, if there was such a thing.
Well, I could go back to my young days now, but I grew up in a farm. But no, I did nursing, I suppose, many moons ago. I qualified as registered general nurse, and after that I would have worked for a period of time in the drugs and aid services in Dublin, and as well as nursing, and I kind of went on from that then into, I suppose, health promotion. I had gone to college, and I went back to college, and I did health promotion studies in Galway, and then from there I was working in health promotion in the Southeast for a number of years, and a job came up in NCBI, and at that stage I really had missed kind of, I suppose, direct client work from the job in health promotion. We didn't have very much of that, so I moved to NCBI, and I'm kind of there ever since, really.
Yeah, definitely a bit of a theme coming through there of all the kind of interest in working for working in health provision, basically.
Yes, okay. Yeah, but I suppose working directly with people as well. Certain roles weren't as conducive to that. Say like the role in health promotion, it was very much, I suppose, around policy and and that kind of
Yeah, very good. So tell us a bit more about your role then at NCBI. You mentioned a couple of things there, but just kind of broadly speaking, what does your role involve?
Okay, well, it's very broad, I suppose, Jude, really. But generally speaking, so when a person makes a referral into NCBI, myself and my colleagues in the Southeast, we'd get the referral in, and we would do an assessment with the individual over the telephone to see if our services were suitable for the individual. And that's an assessment part one, is what that is called. I suppose really it's just, it's a conversation with the individual to find out about their vision loss, how it's affecting them, and to ascertain whether our services are suitable for them or not. At that point, then we'd offer the person an opportunity to come in and meet face to face for what we call basically a functional vision assessment. If they have vision, we look at the vision that they have and look at solutions to, I suppose, the problems that they may have, whether that be, not being able to see text. So it might be, it depends on the level of vision loss an individual have. Sometimes magnifiers can be a solution. Other times it might be, assistive technologies, screen readers and all that. So it is very much a person-centered approach. We look at what it is that the individual requires. So I suppose it kind of breaks out into a number of areas then, really, I suppose around, whether they can, if they want to look at reading, if they want to look at, whether it's like mobility, if they're having issues with independent living skills, link them in with, support services. I suppose in the last year, you'd find that a lot of people have been very isolated, so linking them in with the connection network. So it really, I suppose, Jude, it really comes down to what it is that the individual wants. And I suppose sometimes it is difficult for the individual to know what it is that they want or as well. So it is about giving them a flavour of what's actually available and really checking back in with them time and time again then to find out, because people, their vision changes, what they might want one day can change, to the next day as well. So it is around kind of staying in contact. But when we would address, I suppose, the needs that the person would identify, I suppose then we would come back to them after a number of weeks, usually 6 weeks, and see that they were happy with, the solutions that were offered or whatever. And if there was no further contact required, the file will be closed, but the person has the opportunity always to come back to us. And I'd always really encourage people, to keep in regular contact. If they have further deterioration in vision, or if they need support, pick up the phone, because we won't know, because there's so many people out there and there isn't so many staff as such. So, if you have issues, it's to stay in contact, really,
absolutely.
Only support you if you do that, really,
Yeah, absolutely. And just kind of picking up on what you were saying there's so many kind of directions it can go. It's such a broad range of directions that something can go. But has there been any particular aspect of the work that you've maybe taken a particular interest in over the years?
Well, I suppose, I've worked the neurological vision loss is the area that I suppose I would have worked in for the last number of years, as well as just the main body of work. So with that, I suppose oftentimes people don't realise that their vision loss is actually in their brain, as such that their brain isn't processing the information. They oftentimes would feel that it's their eyes, and yes, it is their eyes. Yeah, but it's the brain, the processing in the brain isn't actually happening. And I suppose there's a huge degree of, I suppose, not misinformation, but I suppose when people have strokes or acquired brain injuries, they may not get the full picture of what's actually happened. And it takes, time for them to actually, I suppose sometimes to actually find out that information, to understand it, for family to be aware of it. So it's good to take time with people to explain it, and that they get a sense of the vision loss, and then get a sense of how they can actually adapt to that type of vision loss as well. It can be the degree of difficulties can be quite varied between individuals. It's like any type of vision loss, really, and what one person will find difficult, another person may not. So you really have to go with where the person is at.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's interesting actually just hearing that, because obviously there's a number of eye conditions that people might be kind of a little bit more familiar with, but there's actually still quite a range of those. But then you've got this kind of area which in a way isn't quite, it's not really a condition of the eye as such, but it has some similar effects. Is it a very complicated field? It sounds complicated.
Yes and no. It depends on how severe, you know, and what areas of the brain are affected. Like some people may have additional, issues as well, like visual processing issues, not just that they have a field of loss. It might be that they, may have agnosia. They mightn't recognize faces. It can be very, very difficult. They may have aphasia. They may not be able to actually, speak the words. So it can be very, very challenging, for people, and even the rehabilitation process can be very, very challenging as well. Oftentimes, I suppose the people with more severe, brain injuries, or maybe get an opportunity to have a stint of rehabilitation in the National Rehabilitation Hospital, but that isn't open to everybody either. Certain age cohorts don't get the access to rehabilitation as easy as others. So that in itself is a problem,
Absolutely.
It is a field as well that I suppose more expertise are being developed all the time. There's I suppose when you even look at occupational therapy or different professions, even the work in actually supporting people with this type of sight loss it's gathering momentum now. There's I certainly don't have every answer without a shadow of a doubt, but I suppose the training courses around this as well are beginning to become as being developed, really, actually. There's an occupational therapist in Canada, Ann-Marie Walsh. She's done a huge amount of work on this and the rehabilitation of people with this type of sight loss. But it's only really kind of coming to the forefront in the last number of years. Really, it's not something that's been I suppose really kind of, you could say, nearly recognised or acknowledged in a way, and even around the registration criteria for people who are registrable with, with vision loss, people with, I suppose, Homonis hemanopias, they don't fit directly into that registration criteria either, so there's work
difficulties around that as well.
Around registration of people, with this particular type of sight loss, because you don't have enough field of vision for driving. So there's a huge impact on vision, but yet you may still have very good acuity. So it does cause issues for people. And like, look, we would work with these individuals and try and look at solutions around free travel, all of that kind of thing. So look, the entitlements, we will work with people to see what's available to them, and then
absolutely,
well,
yeah, very good. Well, I think that gives us a really good kind of an idea of just how much is involved a lot of the time when you're working with somebody with sight loss, and not just one individual, but obviously the broad spectrum of different conditions that there are. There's an awful lot that's involved in it, and it's good to kind of have a little bit of insight into that extra kind of element that you've been involved in as well. Thanks for talking to us today, Ann-Marie. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks very much, Stuart. I'll head off. So
and good to catch up with you.
Thanks again for having me.
Very good. So thank you very much to Ann-Marie Walsh, and really interesting just to hear about some of that extra work that she's been doing with just how I suppose the brain is involved as well with some eye conditions and some sight loss. So really appreciate Ann-Marie Walsh coming on to the show today. Now, next on today's show, we're going to be talking to one of the pioneers, really, of assistive technology. For over 25 years, Glen Gordan has been the architect behind JAWS, probably the best known screen reader around. And we're delighted to be able to talk to Glen today. So you're very welcome to the show, Glen.
It's great to be here. I did hear that you were going to send me a plane ticket, and I was going to be doing the interview in Ireland, and I'm still waiting for that to come.
We heard that you were going to fly us. We heard that you were going to fly us out there.
Oh, yeah. So miscommunication. Always that.
Great that you could join us anyway, Glen. Glen, before we get too much into the development of JAWS as such, can we just kind of go back to the kind of time frame of when you, maybe even before you joined the JAWS project, and get a bit of a sense of maybe your own background and where the assistive technology was at that time. Maybe if we start with your own background, is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up with a real passion for radio broadcasting, and my father was horrified by this idea because radio broadcasting in the United States, even back in the early 70s, was a very unstable career. It's now like unstable times 10,000 as compared to how it was 50 years ago. But he took it upon himself to take me to every radio station that I wanted to go visit, thinking that disc jockeys would discourage me from wanting to do this. And they did in terms of a career, but I've had broadcasting as an avocation for much of my life, with a 30-year hiatus between probably 1992 and, or should I say a 13-year hiatus between 92 and 2015.
Okay. Yeah, very good.
And then my education, I got an undergraduate business degree and found I was qualified for nothing, and decided at that point that I was interested in computing. And so, of course, if you have an undergraduate degree, you want to get a master's, but nobody can get a master's in computing if you don't have an undergraduate in computing or in mathematics. So I got a business degree. I got an MBA from UCLA. And just as a lark, I started volunteering at the computer center there. And because I was interested in programming and software at a computing center where people were interested in high finance and other things, I wasn't competing with all the computer science students. I was competing with the business students. And so I was able to shine a little bit more than probably I would have in the computer science program. And so I was working at UCLA at the business school for about 10 years when I actually had met Ted, because he worked for a company called Maryland Computing Services. They made a talking HP 150 computer. Not many people probably remember that, but it ran DOS. And so I started using it, and one thing led to the next. I started doing some side projects for Ted, and he began working on the Windows version of JAWS. And much to my surprise, I found that it's really where my passion was lying, because I was afraid that I, like so many other blind people, would really lose computing access and life would be much worse off than with DOS.
Yes, yeah. So you kind of touch on what is maybe even at the core of some of this interview, really, just that challenge that would have been there with developing assistive software for a graphical user interface as well. That was the kind of most common technology at the time, I suppose, when you joined the JAWS project itself yourself.
Yes, and the accessibility landscape was essentially non-existent at that time, right? There were not very many big tech companies. Microsoft was probably the biggest. They had one guy named Greg Lowney, and Greg went around touting Microsoft's commitment to accessibility. But of course, other than paying Greg's salary, they didn't have a great commitment to accessibility at the time. And there was some question as to how a screen reader could actually capture graphics on the screen. Because in the days of DOS, the text was in what was called a video memory buffer, but it remained the text, and there was some conversion further down the pipeline to turn it into, what showed up there. So screen readers could always retrieve it. In the Windows world, there was no obvious place where a screen reader could get the text, because at that point the video memory had all churned completely to graphics. And so unless you were doing OCR or something, there was no way to decode those graphics. So the magic early on was the conclusion, and I think it was originally done by Slimware Window Bridge, actually, that if you could write a display driver, the thing that was created to match what was coming from Windows with the actual video card, the display driver was the last place that text was really text. And so you could create a simulated screen where you knew where the text was being written. You could store that off. And then when a user said, tell me what the text is at this location, we'd pretend we were the screen.
Yeah.
And that was the technique that screen readers began to use and slowly proved that Windows could not necessarily be as accessible as DOS, but be in many ways more accessible.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, it's actually really interesting just hearing some of those elements that were involved, because obviously the kind of, on the face of it, the challenge is very obvious, that if you've got something that's a text-based system at the start and you're kind of reading out text, then there's kind of that sounds like a very easy thing by comparison to describing what is essentially a picture on a screen, a big series of pictures on a screen. But it's really interesting to hear what went on behind that. And in terms of your role then, when you joined the JAWS project at the time, what specifically would you have been involved in doing?
Well, you make it sound like we were a big company. Andrew Joyce was 8 people when I
You were
joined.
doing everything.
There weren't many of us.
Yeah.
At that point, there was a developer named Chuck Opperman, who subsequently went on to work for Microsoft. He and I overlapped a little bit.
Yeah.
He was the one who actually created the framework of JAWS for Windows, which was great for me because I didn't know anything about Windows development. I wouldn't have known where to start. And he inadvertently gave me a great proving ground, because with what he had created, I could come in and do tiny changes and help improve JAWS incrementally, which both got us further down the road, but it also allowed me to build confidence.
Yes.
Although I didn't really doubt that I could do it, I was kind of short on the details of exactly how.
Yeah.
I was just sure that I was not going to fail at this. So he created the proving ground. We were working side by side until that first release, I think in the early part of 1995. And shortly thereafter, Chuck left to go work for Microsoft, which was like, it was my happy day. So suddenly, after being there less than a year, I was sort of in charge of things.
Yeah.
So things moved on from there. I wrote most of the code probably for the first 5 years of JAWS, which on the one hand was really invigorating in the sense that, yes, I'm getting all of these things done, and as a result, people are able to accomplish things. But it was also kind of limiting in the sense that I felt 100% responsible. Someone from Microsoft approached me right around that time and said, would you like to come work on Windows NT?
Yeah.
And I couldn't even ethically consider that, because had I left at that point, there was no one, to carry the banner on. Someone else would have been starting from scratch, and it would have put the whole company in jeopardy. So this is not overstating my talent. It was only overstating the fact that all their eggs were in one basket.
Yes, yeah. And I guess as well, I mean, even just that point that you say about writing all the code for 5 years, there's a lot involved in that anyway. So the skill levels have to be up to a fairly high standard at that point anyway. But did you find that was helpful then when it came to kind of refining the product? So you were involved kind of in the lead up to the release of the first JAWS for Windows, when there was the kind of follow up, and as there always is when software is released, there might be little kind of issues that arise. That must have been kind of quite a help to have been so involved up to that point.
Yes, I think it absolutely was. I do want to clarify before I answer the question that although I wrote the majority of the core JAWS code, there were other people who were coming on board and writing small components, but it wasn't it wasn't the meat of JAWS
Yeah.
until, we got into the 2000s.
Yeah.
In terms of being there from the start and then being able to refine, there was a certain advantage to being able to learn things incrementally.
Yeah.
I know lots about Windows now, but it's been, 28 years almost.
Yeah.
And it would be far more overwhelming to try to pick up all that information in a really short time. The other advantage that someone who talked to us when the company was sold and he came in to evaluate how good the code was, he said, yes, it's a real advantage to be the executioner and the coroner, that where all the bodies are buried.
He got away with words, didn't he?
You gradually can go through and improve it, right? If very few other people are in the code, it's easy to make sweeping changes really quickly without displacing anyone, because you're the only one doing this. I remember, to show you what kind of a nerd I was, it was Christmas, I think, of '96. And I said, oh, JAWS needs to switch from being written in C to being written in C++ using MFC, which was Microsoft's development framework at the time. And by New Year's, we were running as MFC, I got
to make
bug.
a quick decision and act on it.
I got a bug. Yes, and could second guess it, but there was no one else to second guess it at the time.
That's definitely handy. Yeah. Very good. And just that kind of ties in maybe with the next question of just throughout the kind of development of JAWS, what would have been some of the developments? Obviously, the implementation of it in the first place was such a big thing straight off, but what are some of the other developments with JAWS that are maybe among your kind of proudest moments?
I think switching to a virtual buffer for the internet. So when we originally did Netscape, what we did for the internet was we simply turned on screen echo and we would read what was written to the screen, but there was no way of reviewing it. We'd read what was written to the screen. If you didn't catch it, you could refresh the screen, but that was kind of it. And then we'd read the link that you had tabbed to. Very, very primitive by today's standards. I think Doug Joffrey at Windowise at the time was the first to do some variant of the virtual buffer. But we did it too. I think that was probably the main seed shift in terms of how people consume content on the web. We did it wrong the first time, or at least in a suboptimal fashion. And a couple of years later, as the web got more complicated, we had to rework it. But I think that's significant. I think a significant change was Microsoft beginning to add Microsoft Active Accessibility, which was a way that applications could explicitly tell screen readers, this is the important information. That was good and that was bad. The good part was they had a way of communicating things. The bad part was they often did it in a really clunky, incorrect, incomplete way.
Yes, yeah.
So there was an additional thing that we stumbled on really early. Applications in the Microsoft Office suite all have something called the object model. And it was not developed for accessibility. It was developed for sighted developers to write add-ins for Word. You're running a mail order company and you need to do something with form letters. You can write something into Word that'll generate the form letters and let you manually make changes. You know what I'm saying? But whatever the application was.
Yeah.
And we figured out early on, and I don't think it was necessarily me, that the object model was there and it could give us access to information that wouldn't otherwise be present.
Yeah.
And because JAWS had a scripting language from the very start where people could write scripts in a slightly higher level language than the core of JAWS was written, we could leverage that information from the object model to get JAWS to say and braille things
Yes, yeah.
in a reasonable way.
That must be quite a sense of achievement as well when you're able to kind of, I suppose it's manipulate is maybe the probably the most correct word in some ways. It's like the original purpose for a particular feature in software wasn't what you were going to use it for, but you were going to adapt it to be able to be pretty much what you needed. That must give you quite a lot of satisfaction at times.
It was evolutionary, and I think for things that people find easy, that come naturally, and for many of us who are working on JAWS, I think we fit into that category. If it didn't feel hard to do, it doesn't feel like we deserve to take a whole lot of bows. If I'm making sense, it's like, oh
Yes,
yeah, it was fun and it was really interesting, but it's not like, we cured polio. We absolutely did significant work, but that's typically not how you think about it at the time. You think about, okay, what's the problem du jour? What needs to get solved? How do we deal with this? Oh my God, the world is ending. We're never going to come up with a way around this.
Yes, yeah. I don't know if anything comes particularly to your mind, but just as you're talking there, I was kind of thinking just those developments that would come up by, for example, Microsoft you mentioned there, and when they're kind of progressing things along the accessibility route, if you like, but it actually ending up maybe creating as many difficulties as it solves. Was there any, and maybe something doesn't come to mind immediately, but was there anything that you particularly found, this actually presents us with quite a problem to really work out, something that was really a challenge to be able to make sure that JAWS could cope with it?
Yeah, I can't think of anything specific at the moment. Windows NT, which XP was based on, and now all modern version of operating systems in the Windows domain were based on Windows NT. That was a little bit of a challenge to get going. We were one of the first on NT. We certainly were the first that was priced reasonably. The first one, I can't remember what it was called, but I remember it was $4,000 or $5,000 per user just because they could get it at the time. The relationship with Microsoft, is an interesting one, as they now have their own screen reader and magnifier.
Yeah.
At the same time, they are working to help us as third-party vendors, but there's a certain competitive spirit there, right? Because they also have these products, and we need to make sure that we have value add, because it's hard to compete with free if you're only as good as free.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And it's always interesting just to see developments of kind of different things that work in a kind of symbiotic relationship as well, particularly if there are sort of interests that are merged in it and some interests that aren't merged. It's quite interesting to see where that goes sometimes. Can we just maybe talk broadly about technology, maybe more in general? How do you feel that technology in general has facilitated the needs of people with sight loss?
I think in a couple of ways. One of them is that I think it's the great equalizer if you are working remotely or if you're communicating with someone remotely who has never physically met you. Because it's very easy to put your personality and your interests ahead of your blindness. If you physically meet someone, they will eventually realize that you can't see, and that may be the part about you that immediately gets their attention. Whereas if you're on an online forum or email list or Facebook, all of those things tend to be the great equalizers. So that to me is probably the biggest one. The technology specific ones, it's great to be able to have a phone in your pocket and do so many things there. If only related to navigation and getting around. There was a case when I was away on a business trip and the touchscreen on my iPhone was beginning to fail. And I started thinking, how am I going to function without my phone? It's so quick that we have gotten to the point of the phone being everything. You know, how am I going to call? How am I going to call a cab? How? How am I going to do that? You know, how am I going to, check whether or not the plane is on time? Fortunately, the phone held up for the duration of the trip, so I didn't have to have that problem. But yes, I think it's pretty phenomenal. I also think that voice assistants have become really useful. The thing that I use Alexa for as much as anything, do you care to guess?
Go on.
I never would have thought this.
Go on. I don't care to guess.
Reordering products.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's so easy to say reorder X and I can be washing the dishes. I don't have to be doing anything specifically at the computer, and it's reordered in 2 or 3 sentences. That stuff's really powerful.
And in terms of kind of the correlation between AI and those kind of virtual assistants and things like that, and then a screen reader, is that kind of correlation something that's getting stronger and stronger? Is that something that's kind of a natural ally, if you like?
We think so, which is why we've added the voice assistant to all of our software, JAWS, Zoom Text, and Fusion. But because there is enough of a time lag between the time you issue the command, it goes up to the cloud, it gets recognized, and it comes back to us as a command.
Yeah.
It's not something that you're going to want to do over and over again for really common tasks.
Yeah.
We think it's the sweet spot for people who may not have lived and breathed our software for their whole lives. You know, where they've started with a phone or a tablet and come over to something like JAWS when they're in high school and suddenly realize, oh, I can't really write a complex term paper using my iPhone. So now they're kind of under the gun. Anything that we can do to help them begin to master our software is a good thing. And in some small way, commands that you don't do commonly, having those available through voice may be useful, right? And then if someone begins to realize, oh, I've been doing this for voice over and over again, it might be worth looking it up. So that's where I think it really helps people. For the commands that you may want to do, they generally exist. You don't remember what the keystroke is.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, and there is that kind of very natural link in there as well. Looking forward, what sort of areas do you think maybe there's still work to be done in, or is there anything that you'd kind of particularly like to see in terms of developments for accessibility in the coming years?
I think so much of the world now has gone to the web. When the web was originally created, you would typically read a page from top to bottom and you would act on some of the links that seemed interesting. Now, although web technologies are used, and although you can look at all these sites as if they're a flat web page from top to bottom, that tends not to be the most efficient way of using them. And so improvements in the usability of those apps, both the things that the app designers can add, but also those things that screen reader authors can add, so that many of us who are blind don't say, "Oh, give me a Win32." That's sort of the native. The native Windows app. There are many cases when I'll say, "Give me a Win32 app" rather than a web page. You know, Outlook has webmail. And it is possible for me to use webmail, but I'm still more efficient with Outlook. Well, why is that? How much of that is the screen reader not doing as much as we possibly could, and how much of it is the way that the website offers navigation commands? Because not everything is available in a quote virtual buffer at the same time, and so it's up to the the page itself to let you use commands to navigate and get to the items that are most likely of interest to you at that time.
Yeah.
So I think that's where that's likely where the big push is. I'm waiting for thinking and typing. I think there's a little ways away, but I want to be able to compose based on my thoughts.
Wow, I wouldn't want to necessarily see what would come out of that if that was for me. It could be very messy. Could be
Yeah,
all over the
I
place.
would want to basically do my own proofreading.
Yeah, that's it. Well, it's been fascinating talking to you, Glenn. Really appreciate you coming on the show. It's really interesting just to hear some of those kind of challenges in the early days, but also the general development, the amount of work that went into JAWS as well. Something obviously that a lot of people, they might not necessarily take it for granted, but it's become such a part of the landscape that it's really interesting just to hear some of the kind of the origin story almost. So really appreciate you coming on the show today, Glenn.
Well, thank you, Jude. It was my pleasure. Nice chatting with you. A great set of questions.
Lovely to talk to you. And of course, for anybody who wants to listen back to that interview, they can listen on YouTube or any of the regular podcast platforms as well. So really enjoyed that chat with Glen Gordan. So next up, we're going to move on with the show now, and we're going to have Joe Lonergan with us for this part. So you're very welcome, Joe.
Hi, Jude.
And Joe, you're taking on the poison chalice of a live demonstration. You're going to be going through how to set up a shopping list on an Alexa device.
That's right, Jude. Yeah, so Alexa, it's a really handy tool. As Mr. Gordon just said there, he used it for shopping and that kind of stuff. Also creating shopping lists. So you can create shopping lists with all your smart assistants, but for today we're going to use Alexa. I'm going to use an Amazon Echo Dot. And the most important thing about creating a shopping list is accessing that shopping list afterwards. So no point in creating a shopping list if you can't access it. Yeah. So when you're in the shop, or maybe you want to share the shopping list with your assistants or your family or whoever it may be. So I have an Echo Dot here beside me. I changed the name to Echo so I don't set everybody's shopping list off when they don't want my items on their shopping list.
You have our groceries enabled. Do you want to open it?
Echo, stop. Echo, stop. So she was listening to the wake word there while I was talking. So there is a shopping list from yesterday, so I'm going to clear that. I'm going to check, see is there one on at the moment. I think there still is one. Echo, what's on my shopping list?
You have 14 items on your shopping list. Here are the 5 most recent: kitchen towel, bread, Vanish Gold, baby formula and water. Would you like to hear the next 5 items?
No.
Okay.
So I hope that's loud enough.
Yeah, absolutely. You can hear that clear.
So
yeah,
I'm going to clear that shopping list now. So Echo, clear the shopping list.
You'd like to remove all items from your shopping list, right?
Yes.
Done.
So I've removed the shopping list now, so I can start again. Or I'm going to maybe add possibly 5 items to it, and then I'm going to open the Alexa app on the phone and see can we see what's on the shopping list and share the shopping list.
Right.
So Echo, add bread to the shopping list.
I added bread to your shopping list.
Echo, add sugar to the shopping list.
Sugar added to your shopping list.
Echo, add butter to the shopping list.
I've put butter on your shopping list.
Echo, add milk to the shopping list.
I've put milk on your shopping list.
Echo, add tomatoes to the shopping list.
Tomatoes added to your shopping list.
And if I wanted to remove one of those items, I just discovered I actually have that already. I can say, Echo, remove tomatoes from the shopping list.
I've ticked off tomatoes from your shopping list.
Which is handy, you know. So I'll add one more. Echo, add kitchen towel to the shopping list.
I added kitchen towel to your shopping list.
Yeah, so that's fair enough. We've added 5 items to the shopping list, and they're there for me now if I want to go into the app. So when I get to the supermarket, I can access them and tick them off as I go around the supermarket, or as I said, I can share them with somebody. So I'm going to open the app now.
Amazon Music, Real Rewards, Amazon Alexa.
This is on my iPhone. This can be done on an Android phone also, or you could also access them through alexa.amazon.com.
Twitter with Amazon Alexa. Amazon Alexa, help and feedback button.
I'm going to slow down the voice a little bit.
Speaking rate, punctuation, speaking 65, 60%, 55%.
So people can understand it.
Tap to talk to Alexa from this app.
I'm going to flick right now.
Alexa. Shopping, 14 items. Actions available. Shopping, 14 items.
It says 14 items, but I think that's the older list. So I'm going to double tap and it should refresh.
Shopping. Kitchen towel, tap to edit. Add item button.
So I'm up at the top now. I'm going to flick right and see what items are on my list.
Kitchen towel, tap to edit. Milk, tap to edit. Swipe, butter, tap to edit. Sugar, tap to edit. Bread, tap to edit. Completed. Heading.
All right, so there's my 5 items. And if I was in the shop, I can double tap on any item to knock it off the list as I get it. So,
bread, tap to edit.
So when I get bread,
Swipe
I can
left to right to move item to the completed item list. Swipe right to left to display more and delete option. Checkbox, not checked.
So I double tap there.
Actions, bread, tap to edit. Swipe left to right to move item to the completed item list. Swipe right to left to display more and delete option. Checkbox, checked.
Bread is no longer on my shopping list. So, but if I wasn't going to the shop myself and I wanted to share the shopping list with somebody,
yeah,
I can flick back up until I see the word share.
Completed. Sugar, tap to edit. Butter, tap to edit. Milk, tap to edit. Kitchen towel, tap, add item. Shopping. More. Share. Button.
There we are, share. When I double tap on this share button, a share sheet will come up, the iPhone share sheet. And the people that you most recently contacted will come up, and also options to copy the text will come up. So I'm going to double tap on share now.
Share. Shopping.
Now my
kitchen towel.
My share sheet comes up.
3.
And I'm going to move my finger down the screen.
Michelle, messages, mail, button, Twitter, message, airdrop, Joe Light, Brian Carr, Steve, Lindsay Carr, Andy, messages, Robert, Shane Byrne, Michelle,
right, I'm
messages.
Double tap
button,
there, and I'm going to send the shopping
text
list.
Field is editing, shopping.
You can imagine then.
P. Miss, send, Q, send. Button.
You can imagine that's a member of your family that you're sending it to,
yeah,
or someone's giving you a hand. Maybe you have home help or personal assistance. And I'm going to double tap. I'm going to double tap on send.
Send message.
And now that's sent, and that person can help me get my shopping.
And that when you send that, does the recipient have to have the Alexa app, or does that send as kind of more like a text-based thing? How does that work?
Now, so
back button.
I'll go in and show you how it appears on the text.
Clubhouse, music, phone, messages.
Go into messages.
Messages. Your text message. AI back button.
Hold on.
Back button. Messages. Search. Converse. Michelle.
There we are.
Messages. Your iMessage. Delivered. Your iMessage. Shopping. 1. Kitchen towel. 2. Milk. 3. Butter. 4. Sugar. Shared from the Amazon Alexa app. 15. 20.
Yeah, so that's the message that person will have received. It says shopping with a colon at the top, and then the list of items. And it says at the bottom, of course, shared by the Amazon Alexa app, which is fair enough.
Yeah,
it lets people know you created your shopping list with the Amazon Echo. But I don't think you can share using your voice. But as I said, you can use the web, alexa.amazon.com to share, and you can use the smartphone app as you just seen. So that's creating a basic shopping list. As I said, you can do this with your other smart assistants. Also, Siri. The steps are very similar.
Yeah.
And even with the Google Home, if you didn't want to create it with the Google Home, you can also create a shopping list with, I think it's shoppinglist.google.com, and you can share it via email there also.
Very
But
good.
yeah, for today's exercise, it was Alexa, and that's very basic and a really useful tool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that ability to share that shopping list as well is really handy. So, thank you very much for taking us through that, Joe. That was really good, and no hiccups with connection or anything like that. It went swimmingly.
No, I didn't expect any hiccups here. Very little faith, Jude. Thanks for that.
Ye of little faith. Yeah.
Thanks, Jude.
Thanks very much, Joe. Appreciate it. So that was Joe Lonergan taking us through how to create and share an Alexa shopping list. So I appreciate that from Joe. So moving on now to our tech news. And of course, just before we do, just a reminder that if you want any support, obviously with any of the technical things that we talk about on the show, you can always contact us on labs@ncbi.ie if you want any training on any of these devices, the Alexa devices, or any similar ones as well. So moving on to our tech news, and first up, if online gaming is your thing, you might have been interested to know that last week the game streaming platform Google Stadia became available for the new Chromecast with Google TV device. It's been available for a while, of course, but now you don't need the separate Chromecast Ultra device to be able to run Google Stadia. Well, this week it's the turn of Microsoft, who have made their xCloud gaming platform available to play using a browser on your iOS device or on your PC, which basically means that, like Stadia, you don't need a separate games console to be able to play your favorite games, but you can use it straight from the devices that you already own. So we'll keep a bit of an eye on those developments, of course, in relation to accessibility, and we'll let you know about that in the future. Next on tech news is a big piece of news from last week. 6 years on from being announced as the last version of Microsoft's famous operating system, Windows 10 is being replaced. So Windows 11 was announced last week, and just to give us a bit more information on that, we're going to invite our panel on for a few minutes. So maybe we could start with JP. JP, what do we know about the features of Windows 11 at this point?
Yeah, sure, Jude. I can go through some of the features that were announced at a virtual event that Microsoft held last Thursday, 24th of June. So as you pointed out, Windows 11 will be the successor to Windows 10, which has been around now for 6 years. It's actually just shy of 6 years now. It was July 2015 when Windows 10 was released. So we're just have six years using Windows 10 since that was released. So new features that were announced at the virtual event last Thursday. The biggest thing really, just in generally speaking, is just big design changes coming with Windows 11. To start with, we are expecting a new, more like Mac-like interface. So it's arguably going to be the biggest change off the bat with Windows 11 is the interface. So it's much more Mac-like. In terms of visual changes, we're looking at Windows 11 will be featuring a cleaner design with rounded corners around open windows and lighter color shades. The next, the iconic Windows Start menu has moved from the bottom left of the screen, where we're familiar with seeing it, to the bottom center of the screen, along with app icons on the taskbar. So it's very much like how apps are arranged on the bottom of a smartphone or tablet. Okay. The layout itself is somewhat comparable to Mac OS, as I pointed out, but it's worth noting that you can bring it back to the traditional interface if you like. So you can return the start button over to the bottom left-hand side of the screen. So if you want to bring it back to how it was, you can do that. Just going to some of the other changes that were introduced. Widgets. Next big introduction is widgets coming to Windows 11. So in the taskbar, which is located at the very bottom of your desktop screen, there's going to be a new icon called widgets. And selecting this will bring up a customizable panel of widgets that can give you access to information such as weather and news. And interestingly, widgets were actually introduced in Windows Vista, but with Windows 11, they're coming back. They're set to be much more customizable and easier to use. And then we have support for Android apps. So in Windows 11, we're going to have support for Android apps. You'll be able to install those from the new revamped Microsoft App Store. And these will be integrated into the Start menu in Windows for the first time, and they'll also appear in the taskbar if you wish. So overall, like this integration of like Android apps into Windows is kind of showing how like desktop and mobile environments are emerging more and more. Yeah. And then just to go through maybe one more of the kind of new additions that it's coming, and none of the enhancements that are coming with Windows 11. There's going to be tighter integration of Microsoft Teams that many people will be interested to hear about. So Microsoft's popular video chat platform Teams will be going to be more, say, tightly integrated in Windows 11. And it's going to reflect the fact that so many people are obviously now working remotely, and they're maybe trying to a hybrid situation where so many days in the office and so many days working from home. And of course, this is getting much more reliance on the Teams app. So for starters, Teams is going to appear in the Start menu for the first time, as well as on the taskbar. And it's expected to be easier to connect to your contacts through text, chat, and video calls. And interestingly, it's also going to be possible to connect to contacts who don't even have the Teams app, using it like a two-way SMS kind of conversation, so through texting. So in this regard, Microsoft, like, they're very much putting remote working front and center through tighter integration of the Microsoft Teams app.
Interesting, yeah. So some interesting changes coming.
Yeah.
When is it actually due to be released, and is it going to be something that people can get as a free upgrade, as was the case with Windows 10?
Sure. Well, originally Microsoft suggested that Windows 11 will be rolled out in autumn of this year and continue to be rolled out in 2022. But more recently, it has been hinting at actually an October release date for Windows 11. So there's actually some speculation now in recent days, only yesterday, that the rollout will commence actually from October 20th or even earlier, but we'll have to wait and see, so to be sure.
Okay.
That's true.
Yeah.
And is it something that's likely to be a free upgrade as well?
It's due to be a free upgrade, yeah. So if you're already a Windows 10 user, Windows 11 will appear as a free upgrade to your machine. So most Windows 10 PCs currently being sold will be able to upgrade to Windows 11. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah, excellent. So maybe if we can bring Daniel in for a moment. Daniel, what do we know about the kind of system requirements? Will all devices that are running Windows 10 be able to run Windows 11?
No, unfortunately, is the bad news. Now, I just have to put a big health warning on this, because it's not decided by Microsoft yet at the moment, but it's looking like Intel 8th generation or newer processors, and for AMD, that's Zen 2 and the Qualcomm 7 and 8 series look likely to meet. Now, this is still not guaranteed either. Now, however, they are Microsoft are working on the slightly older Intel 7th generation and AMD Zen 1 releases that may meet their principles. And the reason for this is they're trying, I suppose, to shake off the reputation that Windows has, that it's susceptible to malware and all, all nasty things that can be out there. And so this is the reason they're going with requiring hardware that has better security integration in it, and that's what's making the difference here. So it looks on one hand to be a good move by Microsoft, but for someone who maybe wants to try out the new operating system without having to go along and shell out on a new unit, it's not so good news.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And maybe if we bring in Sean as well at the moment, just kind of generally, when we're talking about accessibility, when there's a new operating system, there's always kind of a few concerns when a new operating system is released in terms of accessibility, isn't there?
Yeah, it's kind of the curse and the benefit of early adopting, because like with Windows 10, they released the Edge browser with that, not the Microsoft Edge browser that we have now, or the Chromium, I should say.
Yeah.
It was initial kind of Spartan-based browser, which just didn't have any accessibility. There's no API access for JAWS or NVDA to actually access and work with that browser, and that was set as the default PDF reader. Also, it was very easy to change that, and like also easier to change. You could search for Internet Explorer at the time, but the curse of early adopting is for you come across all these pitfalls, and the benefit for early adopting for like Microsoft is to find out all these issues early. They can get them fixed.
Yes.
So the key thing here is, like, if you have one laptop or computer and it's your main device for accessing content and information, it's probably best not maybe to switch for 2 or 3 months, maybe even 6 months into it. But if you had a second machine that you weren't as concerned about, and maybe enjoy testing new technology and seeing what's available, if you were to use that second machine to move to Windows 11 early, and you found issues with your screen reader, or you just found internal issues, maybe with Outlook on it, or maybe you're using an older Outlook on a new version of Windows, or even a new version of Outlook on new Windows, you could report back these issues, and therefore it allows the organization to fix them a lot quicker and more efficiently. So early adopters get the best of both worlds, in which they get access to all the early developments, to get all the cool new bells and whistles like JP was talking about there, but you also take all the risk of finding the issues, and it'd be great if you could report back on them, because then they get fixed a lot quicker.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of good to have that kind of balanced outlook as well. Is there any real rush with it? So if people are kind of hearing that and they're thinking, okay, I'll delay installing or upgrading to Windows 11, how long have I got?
I think if you want to stick with Windows 10 and not make the move at all, Jude, the support lifeline on Windows 10 is rolling out, I think, right out to the end of 2025.
Okay.
So we're quite a bit off on that.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you are apprehensive, or like some people just they love working with what they're working with, and why should I change what I'm happy it's doing everything I want. Yeah, absolutely. Your Microsoft is going to secure Windows 10 with constant updates right out till at least the end of 2025. So, and often they release these arbitrary dates, and next thing, they throw on an extra year onto it at the end. Before they really do say, right, you're out on your own without support. Like Windows 7 is not long gone now. Was it about a year, I think, lads, is it? Windows 7 is being dropped. Yeah.
I think it's important, Daniel, to probably maybe strike a balance on that, because people do like holding on to what's they're used to and what's good, but that can turn into the situation where you're holding on for too long and you're too close to end of support.
Yeah.
And especially with the likes of all we spoke about the different types of ransomwares and everything else happening, that it's not important. It's not as important to jump onto Windows 11 when it happens, but 2 or 3 years in, I'd be considering it if I haven't already. But you don't want to hold on to your old one. We all loved Windows 7 and XP, but if you don't move, you can get stuck with incompatibility issues, and then worse, you can get you put yourself more at risk. So there's always there's ebb and flow, and you have to kind of weigh everything up there.
And speaking of Lifeline, it is announced with Windows 11 that Internet Explorer, I know it's a favorite of some of our listeners, it is definitely axed in Windows 11.
Oh, okay, yes.
And it's kind of half axed at the moment in Windows 10, that it'll constantly nudge you over to the new Microsoft Edge Chromium browser. So it's kind of the writing on the wall for Internet Explorer now for a while.
Yeah. Okay. So it's another thing to be aware of. Well, it's kind of interesting just to have that sense of what's happening with Windows 11. We'll revisit this maybe in a future live event as well when we know a little bit more. But thanks to the panel there for giving us a bit of an overview of the release of Windows 11 as well. Now let's move on to our tech help for this week, and we'll come back to JP for this. So what have you got for us this week on tech help?
Hey Jude, so we did receive a question in during the week from someone who asked, is there a way to mute JAWS when in a meeting? The short answer to this is yes, there is a way. You can use a feature what's called speech on demand in JAWS to do this for you. This is a feature that was actually introduced in JAWS and Fusion 2018 and allows users to completely mute speech during using a layered command, which is insert spacebar and then S. Exact same layered command that can be used to unmute speech in JAWS. We want to do that. So we can think of several situations this could be helpful. So for example, as this person pointed out, maybe in a meeting, a Teams meeting or virtual meeting, playing a video, maybe where any situation where you don't need JAWS speech all the time. And also for someone who might rely on Braille. So maybe you want to activate speech on demand so they don't hear speech when switching between open applications, pressing Alt and Tab, or navigating documents or websites using the arrow keys or Braille display controls. So overall, yeah, speech on demand, a very welcome feature that's been introduced to the JAWS screen reader in recent times.
Excellent, very good. So thanks for taking us through our tech help there, JP. Now, I think that we had a couple of questions in. I'm not sure if they're ones we can answer just at the moment. Let's just check in with Daniel or Sean there. are the we've got a couple of questions in, I believe.
I think the questions are from Laura, and she's a few questions about sort of helping out maybe with NCBI, and that we can give her a call off the air and discuss that with her.
Perfect. Very good. So thanks for your questions, Laura, and we'll get back to you on that. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's show. Just a reminder again, of course, that if you need technology assistance, you can get support from the Labs team from 9 to 5 Monday to Friday on 1850 92 30 60, or you can email labs@ncbi.ie. I think I might have been reading out even the older number there. So let's just read out the 1800 911 110. Am I reading out the right one, I hope? And 015312975. Labs@ncbi is the email address if you want any help there as well. So the NCBI services number, of course, is 1850 33 43 53, and email info@ncbi.ie. And of course, we always appreciate your support of NCBI. If you'd like to make a donation to help support our services, you can do that through donate.ncbi.ie. Just a reminder as well about the NCBI Smart Hub project. We're going to have a little bit of an update on that in one of our future shows, most likely our next show in 2 weeks' time. And that's really coming on well. But if you're interested in helping out with testing, if you want to email smarthub@ncbi.ie, then we can add you to that as well. Just before we go, just a reminder of what we'll be talking about in some of our future live events. We'll have that update and the demonstration of the NCBI Smart Hub, so you'll be able to see it in action a little bit. So that'll be good to see that and get a bit of an update of when that'll be available to you as well. We'll also be talking to our colleagues in RNIB about technology in one of our future live events too. And we're going to talk as well about an event that happened for the first time last December. Site Tech Global run an event each year, and we've got the second one coming up later this year. We're going to talk to one of the organisers about that event and what that entails and how you can register for that online event as well. Reminder that our next show is in 2 weeks' time. So that's Tuesday, July 13th, and that will be at the usual time of 2:30 p.m. And of course, if you want to stay up to date with what's happening on our live events as well as plenty more, you can subscribe to our newsletter on our website as well, or you can email us at labs@ncbi.ie if you'd like to do that. So all that's left for me to do then is to thank our guests today, Joe Lonergan and Ann-Marie Walsh from the NCBI team, and of course Glen Gordan as well. And of course, we want to thank everyone for listening in as well. And from JP, Sean, Daniel and myself, goodbye for now, and we look forward to having you all back with us soon for another NCBI Labs live event.